The way I fought it was by being so rude. In a recent interview, Sally Field carefully named the meanest and most harmful people she had ever worked with. These charges were not made at random. They were based on Sally's own experiences, things she had seen, and carefully written down patterns of behavior she had seen in people working in this business for decades. Who did they seem to be? What made Sally Field, a woman of great character, write down such painful truths? And what secrets did these famous people hide behind their well-made public images? Let's start with the first name on Sally's list to fully answer these questions. Tom Hanks was the one she thought was the smartest and most dishonest of them all. 1. Behind the everyman act, Tom Hanks is the master of lying. People all over the world loved Tom Hanks in his parts in Forrest Gump, Cast Away, and Saving Private Ryan. He made Hollywood's nice guy stereotype a reality. But Sally Field's private journals show that behind that carefully crafted image was a cruel manipulator who would do anything to control his career and the careers of those around him. During filming for a major drama in 1989, Hanks purposely ruined the performance of a co-star by asking for changes to the script that would make his own part look bigger and better. Sally saw this happen and wrote down how Hanks would consistently hurt people he saw as competition for his power. He was good at tricking directors into thinking that other actors weren't as good as they were. Arranging for them to be fired from projects without giving them a chance to defend themselves. Sally wrote about a particularly mean time when Hanks said that a bright female co-star was having problems with preparation for work. He did this to make the director doubt her, which led to her replacement. Sally was most worried about Hanks's ability to keep up his public image while carrying out these plans with surgical precision. A lot of what she wrote was about how he used his fame as America's sweetheart to trick producers and directors into believing his version of events was true. During talks where he was systematically ruining someone's career, he would smile. His friendliness never wavered, even when he dealt the worst professional blows. After hours, Hanks wasn't the friendly and easy-to-talk-to person that everyone knew. He was cold and calculated, and he was set on keeping his job no matter what. Sally pointed out that he was very good at making people think that the people he hurt were somehow the problem, never letting the story show that he was the one who hurt their careers. Robin Williams, the darkness behind the comedic masks. Robin Williams showed the world that he was a happy, spontaneous comedian whose talent came from a real place of kindness and warmth. But Sally Field's inner writings show a very troubled person who used humor as both a shield and a weapon. Her journals show that Williams often used his comedy to put down and embarrass the people around him. He specifically targeted weak people on set with jokes that hurt much deeper than the laugh suggested. Sally wrote down times when Williams would make fun of crew members and use his sarcastic wit to hurt their self-esteem and confidence without giving them a chance to react or get better. She saw him make fun of the women he was working with in public, which made the set a scary and anxious place where no one knew when they would be the target of his cruel humor. Sally found it most unsettling that William could make being mean seem funny. He would laugh off his own bad behavior by saying it was just part of his comedic nature, as if being funny made being mean okay. He would use tricks to put weak people in a bad position and then use humor to hide his tracks, making sure that anyone who complained would be seen as not having a sense of humor. Instead of being hurt legally. His ties with co-stars were usually businesslike rather than real. He was also known for making people do mental work for him without giving anything real in return. Sally talked about how Williams would find out about people's fears and weak spots and then use that information in his comedy to make jokes that hurt people right where he knew they would hurt the most. Sally pointed out that Williams' personal problems with drug abuse made him less stable and more unpredictable, which led to angry outbursts that went against his public image of being compassionate and educated. He had such big mood swings sometimes that people didn't know if they would see the friendly performer or the angry, unfriendly one. She wrote about those times. 13. Burt Reynolds, the ego that ate up everyone else. It was impossible to avoid Burt Reynolds on screen. He had a magnetic quality that drew people to him like moths to a flame. However, Sally Field wrote in her journals about a man who was so full of himself and insecure that he hurt everyone around him. Reynolds needed to be reassured and validated all the time. What he did when he didn't get it made him more angry and degrading. Sally wrote a lot about how Reynolds treated his female co-stars, describing a pattern of control and abuse that went far beyond what is normal in Hollywood. He would flirt with and seduce women on purpose, but once he proved his power over them, he would cut them off cold, hurting their feelings and careers. He had to be the center of attention so badly that he would ruin other actors' scenes to make sure he was the only one in the spotlight, even if it meant ruining a great moment of working together as actors. During shooting, Reynolds would ask for changes to the script that made his character look smarter and more heroic while making other characters look less smart. Sally wrote about a time when Reynolds demanded that a great scene be cut because he thought the actress's moment took away from his own character arc. He used his charm to get what he wanted and then turned very mean when people didn't meet his high standards. Sally wrote about how he used his fame to scare directors and producers into going along with his decisions by making fun of them in public. Reynolds was especially mean to people he thought were weaker or less important than him. He enjoyed making them feel bad and often laughed out loud at their pain. 4. Julia Roberts, the smart charm of manipulating emotions. The reason Julia Roberts became famous was because she was America's sweetheart, the normal girl next door who was also very pretty and skilled. But Sally Field's private papers showed a very different person. They showed someone who used her charm and skill at being liked to get exactly what she wanted. Roberts was a crafty con artist who could instantly change her personality and become either the nicest person on set or the meanest person you can imagine, based on what needed to be done. Sally wrote about how Roberts would make friends with actors in a way that seemed sincere, but then she would use those friendships against them by telling producers private information and secrets about her new friends. She would make up long stories about how unprofessional or unstable other people were, sowing doubt that would grow until those people were shut out of chances and unable to work in the industry. Roberts was very careful about how she looked, so anyone who could hurt her reputation had to be carefully handled or kicked out of her circle. Sally saw Roberts hurting a younger actress's career on purpose because she was afraid of what her potential could do. She did this by spreading stories and whispers about the actress to make her seem unreliable. Roberts would spread lies about the person, complain to the project directors, and keep them from talking to anyone else until they were fired or left to get away from the hostile atmosphere. Sally wrote down that Roberts' tricks were so clever that the people he was after often blamed themselves and believed Roberts' story instead of realizing they were being manipulated on purpose. Sally thought it was most unsettling that Robert didn't feel bad about what he did. She could smile and accept acclaim even though she knew the truth about how bad she was being, and she never felt bad about it or cared about the people she hurt on her way up. 5. The sugary sweetness of Dolly Parton hides ruthless desire. The world saw in Dolly Parton an image of purity, faith, and sincere kindness. She seemed to genuinely care about people and their well-being. Sally Field wrote that when Parton was being very private, she was a cruel businesswoman who would use anyone or anything to grow her company and stay in charge. Sally said that Parton's sweet public appearance hid a very cold person who saw people as assets that could be used or thrown away depending on how useful they were. She would consistently get things of value from her workers, giving them very little money while expecting them to work hard and be loyal, and then replacing them with younger, cheaper workers when they stopped following the rules. Parton was known for the elaborate acts of kindness and giving she did in public. Sally saw these as nothing more than acting to keep up her image, while her actions behind closed doors told a completely different story. People were given chances by her, and she kept giving them hope, then forgot about the promises she had made and left them when they were no longer useful. Sally wrote about Parton's control over the media and public opinion with almost scientific accuracy. She pointed out how Parton had crafted every part of her image to seem real and relevant even though it was all made up and planned. Behind closed doors, Parton looked down on people who were less important than her, laughed at their goals, and was completely mean in her business deals. Sally saw Parton make fun of employees in public, then watch her on TV with a worried look on her face, as if she thought the employees had misunderstood what she was trying to say. She saw kindness as a way to control people instead of a true sign of care, and she used it to get what she wanted from them. The fake intellectual dictator. Shirley MacLaine portrayed herself as intelligent, wise, and deeply spiritual. She was seen as a woman who had moved beyond the shallow materialism of Hollywood because she was smart and self-aware. But Sally Field's writings showed a very different picture. They showed someone who used her intellectual pretensions and spiritual beliefs as masks for being cruel and manipulative. MacLaine was incredibly cocky about how much smarter or more developed she thought others were, and she was always putting them down. Sally said that McLean would use spiritual jargon and fake intellectual arguments to explain away her increasingly bad and unpredictable behavior, saying that people just didn't have the awareness to understand what she was doing. In public, she would make fun of people who didn't agree with her, saying that their worries and points of view came from a lack of knowledge and spiritual immaturity. Sally wrote down how McLean liked to surround herself with sycophants who would agree with her every whim while she deliberately avoided anyone who could question her decisions or reasons. People who worked for McLean were known to be rude and disrespectful to them. Sally saw times when McLean would laugh at people's real concerns about working conditions or fair treatment. Sally wrote about how McLean would use spiritual ideas as an excuse to not pay workers fairly or give them basic working conditions, implying that material worries were below evolved consciousness. She used her intelligence and what she thought was spiritual power to stay in charge of everything. She wouldn't admit the harm she caused and instead used criticism as proof that other people weren't spiritual. McLean would say that the people who were critical of her were not spiritually developed enough to understand or respect her point of view. The grandmother who tricks people. Olympia Dukakis made a name for herself as Hollywood's wise and caring elder. The mom figure that everyone liked and trusted. But Sally Field's private writings showed that someone used this image to take advantage of weak people, especially younger actors looking for advice and support. Sally said that Dukakis would portray herself as a guide and friend, picking up people's trust and confidence only to use it to get ahead and help herself. She used private information about other people to stay powerful and important in the industry by giving it to producers and directors. Dukakis was known for being mean behind her friendly exterior. She would make fun of people's goals when they weren't looking and brush off their skills with mean comments that she pretended were wise and caring. Sally wrote about how Dukakis would publicly put down younger actors in interviews by saying they were not talented or professional. She would do this while keeping a worried, protective tone that made it impossible to call her out on her cruelty without coming across as rude. Dukakis would get very close to people, making them dependent and obligated on her, but she would suddenly stop loving them if they didn't live up to her standards or if they hurt her job or image. Sally noticed that Dukakis would blame the other person for these sudden rejections, saying that they had let her down or not lived up to their promise. Her biggest strength was making people doubt what they thought and feel bad for questioning her motives. She did this by making victims think they were the ones who hurt her because they weren't good enough. Daryl Hannah, the Ice Queen's planned violence in number 8. Daryl Hannah gave off an air of ethereal beauty and artistic sensitivity. Her ability seemed to come from a place of real emotional depth and honesty. But Sally Field saw a very smart person who used the fact that she was artistic and seemed weak as an excuse to be mean and manipulative. Hannah was very careful to manage her relationships and public image, and she became more and more angry at anyone who threatened her story or asked her about her actions. Sally says that Hannah would join forces with other actors to show support against people she thought were her enemies, but she would quickly break these partnerships if it was in her best interest to do so. She used rumors and gossip as weapons, sharing false information on purpose to hurt other people's careers and reputations. Hannah was famous for not giving credit to others. She insisted that all of her successes were her own work, and she would openly downplay the work of directors, writers, and co-stars. Sally wrote down how Hannah would approach people about relationships and working together, but then turn them down coldly once she got what she wanted from them. The way Hannah treated crew members was famously rude. She thought technical staff were barely deserving of praise. Hannah was talking down to the makeup artists and outfit designers, as if they were less smart or talented than her, which Sally heard. Sally was most upset by Hannah's total lack of responsibility. She was able to do a lot of damage while still being completely sure of her own rightness and artistic ethics. The Method Tyrant by Daniel Day-Lewis. Daniel Day-Lewis built an image as a serious, dedicated actor who worked hard at his craft and didn't give up. Someone who is ready to give up everything for real great performance. But in Sally Field's private observations, the same dedication was used to explain why he was acting more and more erratically and violently toward everyone around him. Sally said that Day-Lewis would use his method acting style as a reason to be mean, rude, and only care about himself on set. Without caring about how it affected their work or personal health, he would demand that everyone follow his process. Day-Lewis would scold directors and cinematographers for not being talented or understanding if their work didn't fit with his vision. His reputation for making the workplace dangerous meant that everyone walked on eggshells to keep him focused and protect his work. Sally wrote down that he often yelled at his co-stars, but he always said it with the belief that his advice was honest and not meant to hurt them personally. Sally saw Day-Lewis yell at an actor over a small part of her performance and then say that he was just giving her honest artistic feedback. Day-Lewis was very bossy and insisted on changes to the plot, choices for the director, and casting choices based on his limited view of the material. He wouldn't change into a different character between takes, sticking to his method persona even if it meant ignoring tired crew members or co-stars who were looking to connect. He was incredibly cocky about his own skills and knowledge of how people work, and he had no idea how unpleasant his actions were for those around him. 10. The Angry Perfectionist, by Tommy Lee Jones. Tommy Lee Jones portrayed himself as a serious actor and director with high standards and real artistic ethics. Someone whose ferocity came from wanting to do the best. But Sally Field wrote about a man whose perfectionism was really a mask for anger issues and dislike for people he thought couldn't meet his ridiculously high standards. Sally said that Jones would yell at people when they did something wrong or didn't do what he expected them to do. He would yell, insult, and shame actors and crew members in public, using his image for being great as an excuse for behavior that went too far and became abuse. Jones was famous for not recognizing or appreciating other people's work because he thought that doing so would make his own job less important. He worked very hard to make his sets a scary place to be, where people rushed to anticipate his needs and avoid making him lose his famous anger. Sally witnessed Jones deliberately keep some people from opportunities because he has a grudge against them and uses his power to stop them from moving up in their jobs. He would spread nasty stories about people's skills and dependability at work, which would hurt their relationships with producers and directors. It was well known that Jones was rude and insulting to female cast and crew members. Sally wrote about several times when he said inappropriate things or thought women were less smart than men. He was completely and firmly sure that he was better than everyone else. 11. The Manipulative Progressive, by Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Joseph Gordon-Levitt carefully crafted an image of himself as an actor who was forward-thinking and thoughtful, deeply committed to social justice and moral principles, and whose values showed in his real care for the people around him. But Sally Field's private reports showed that someone used these ideas to control other people and make excuses for his own abusive behavior. Sally said that Gordon-Levitt would use progressive language and talk about social justice to get weak people to do what he wanted, calling any resistance a moral failure or a lack of awareness. He would openly call out what he saw as ethical flaws in other people, damaging their reputations and careers because he thought he was doing the right thing. Sally wrote down how he liked to set up hierarchies where people who agreed with his particular view were favored and people who disagreed with him were shut out of chances and made fun of in public. Gordon-Levitt was known for getting people to do work for free or agree to terms that were unfair by saying it was for the greater good or for important art. He would offer to be a guide to younger people but then use that role to get emotional and professional work from them without giving anything in return. He was most skilled at manipulating people by making them feel bad for standing up for their own rights or interests, making them believe that being selfish was the real moral flaw. Sally saw Gordon-Levitt routinely put people who questioned him in a separate room and accused their co-workers of not having the right morals. Pierce Brosnan is the attractive killer. Pierce Brosnan used his fame as a leading man to project an air of charm, grace, and romantic appeal. He created the image of the perfect gentleman on screen and in what seemed to be his private life. But Sally Field wrote about a very dishonest person who used his charm to trick and take advantage of others. Sally says that Brosnan's main tactic was to make people feel like they owed him something because they had gained from his name or his support, only to use those debts against them in ways that hurt their professional reputation and personal health. When he wanted something from someone, he would aggressively go after them. Once he got what he wanted, he would become coldly uncaring. Sally saw Brosnan purposely put his co-workers in a bad light by having private relationships with them while keeping up the public image of being friendly and helpful to everyone. He was very good at making it look like he was the only one who really understood or cared about certain people, and then he used that fake closeness to get people to obey and keep quiet. Brosnan was known for making inappropriate comments and advances. He used his charm to make it hard for people to say no without looking rude or lacking in humor. Sally wrote down that he would become suddenly mean to people if they didn't do what he wanted or return his manipulations. His sudden coldness was even more shocking because he had been so nice before. It was amazing how well he could separate things and deny what he was doing. 13. Gary Sinise, the loyal American who isn't honest. Gary Sinise made a name for himself in the public eye as a true patriot who deeply respected military service and felt a link to causes bigger than himself. His values seemed to be based on honesty and genuine dedication. But Sally Field's journals show that Sinise used his image as a patriot and his military ties to control situations and get rid of people who didn't agree with him or his choices. Sinise was known for using his military background to give himself a false sense of moral authority, making it seem like he knew more about what was right and wrong than other people. Sally wrote down how he would back military causes in public while secretly betraying co-workers and making choices that had nothing to do with patriotism and everything to do with power and control. Sinise would make tests of loyalty that looked like moral commitments and ask people to show that their ideals matched his. If someone failed these tests, they could be criticized in public and be forced to work alone. Sally says that Sinise was very careful about how he looked, making sure that any actions that went against his public image were explained away by saying they were misread or taken out of context. He would only hang out with people who agreed with him and would slowly get rid of anyone who could give him honest criticism or different points of view. He was most skilled at manipulating people when he could make them feel like they were betraying something holy if they questioned his actions or goals. 14. Robin Wright, the smart reinventor. Throughout her career, Robin Wright created many public characters, each one carefully crafted to change how people saw her and manage her image, depending on what she thought would best serve her at the time. People who worked with Sally Field said that Wright was very aware of how other people saw her. She is always changing what she says in public to get the most respect and support. Sally wrote down how Wright would make herself out to be a victim whenever it was convenient for her, making up stories about how mean or unfair other people were that were often overdone or fundamentally wrong about what really happened. She was very careful to control information and get rid of anyone who had information that went against the stories she carefully put together. Wright would only join forces with people if it was good for her business. She would leave people behind as soon as they stopped helping her image or job. Sally says that Wright was especially mean to other women because she saw them as competition and systematically hurt their chances while acting like they were sisters and helping each other out. She used people's good intentions and desire to believe her carefully made stories to her advantage, taking advantage of their intelligence and emotional sophistication. Wright spread lies and rumors about co-workers on purpose, so Sally saw how he planted seeds of doubt to hurt their credibility and chances. Because she was so sure that her point of view was right, she couldn't care about how her actions affected other people. Furthermore, she had mastered the art of never truly taking responsibility for the harm she caused. So that's it. These are the carefully researched details that came out of Sally Field's secret journals, showing the dark sides of 14 of Hollywood's most famous people who lived behind their glamorous exteriors. Even Sally Field, who had been through a lot, was shocked by the reality of manipulation, cruelty, and abuse that lay behind the smiles and acceptance speeches. These new facts make us question everything we thought we knew about these well-known figures. They also remind us that the picture we show the world is often built on purpose to hide the truth rather than reveal it. Sally Field wrote down these stories not because she was angry, but because she was deeply committed to truth and accountability and thought that the business and audiences should know what really happened behind closed doors. What do you think about these new facts? Does knowing the truth about these Hollywood stars change how you see their work and what they left behind? Which of these stories shocked you the most? Tell us what you think in the space below. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss any more shocking stories about the dark secrets that these famous families and jobs hide.